but we will start our lecture maybe in a not typical way, because first I would like to invite you to participate in a certain game. I will explain it right now, but in a moment I will also send the instructions to this activity, and I will divide you into groups. So please, later on, I would like to hear from you how you did the activity. So you may also choose one person who will be the spokesperson for this group. So what I would like you to do is this, and you will be working on this in groups, to imagine that you participate in a conference and you come into a room and you can see these badges lying on the desk. You pick up one badge and you stick it to your clothes. And then walking around the room, you try to form groups, but you are not allowed to talk. And the question is, how would you form the groups? So let me send to everyone. Not to everyone, one moment, I will send you the instructions. Yes. Can you help me? I want to share, to find a clip, one moment. Can you, one moment. I want to share a file with everyone. Okay.
A file that is
it should
on
be
the screen. That is
on this computer. Can you help me with this? Yes. I would like to send a file. One moment.
Samego pliku nie wyślę, tylko
No? Okay. I have been told that you cannot send this file, so I will divide you into groups. I will divide you into different groups. So,
so we're going to make 8 groups, yes?
Stop sharing. Yes. I don't know. One moment. One moment.
There's a problem. There is a small problem because we can't find the breakout rooms.
There should be breakout rooms, and I can't see them. We don't have breakout. Oh, now they are here.
Yes, now there are breakout rooms. Okay. Okay.
For 4 minutes. Yes.
So I can see that the breakout rooms are created not by us, but by the tech assistant. Okay, so yes, the breakout rooms are created, and they should last. The breakout room session should last about 3 minutes. Yes, 3 or 4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes. Then I will ask you to talk about how you decided to form the groups. Okay. So once again, you maybe I will show you the badges again.
Yes.
Here are the badges. Imagine that you take one of them. You are in a conference. You are in a conference and you form groups.
Breakout rooms can open. So So the tech assistant, can you please open the breakout rooms?
Can we ask the tech assistant to open the breakout rooms for us? Because this is what we cannot do from our place.
The room are open and you
Okay.
can move as you want.
Okay, thank you.
This can be
Join breakout room?
Do you want us to put people in the rooms? It can be random. So
Can you assign people to these rooms?
or are we supposed to do that?
Okay, only one room.
No,
No.
6 rooms.
6 rooms
Six
for,
room.
yes,
Okay.
for all the
rooms.
people.
5
random
breakout
mix.
are open and then the main one is this.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
but I
Thank
don't
you.
know who people in
It
which,
can
in
can
which
be
room.
random.
It doesn't matter. It can be randomized.
Okay, randomize it.
I don't use. 1 minute. No, that's it. 1 minute.
1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you. Ale jeżeli ja chcę w warsztatach wysłać potem pliki do pracy, to jak ja mam wysłać?
Jak będzie przerwa, to zobaczymy.
Właśnie piszę. Nie mamy na to żadnego wpływu.
Okay, so now people are in breakout rooms, yes?
Not yet. 14 seconds. 10 seconds.
Please tell me when everybody is in the rooms,
Yes,
because
they're
I
in the
have
room.
to count the time.
Yes, they are in the rooms.
They are in the rooms
Because
now.
there are only 4 people.
Okay, here we are 7 and in the session number 1, 2, 3, 8 people. In the session number 2, we have 1, 2, 3,
Okay,
5 people.
that's okay. That's okay.
It's randomly.
Yes, it's random, and I will give the participants 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, you may now close the breakout rooms. We may return to the main session.
Okay, I will close.
Thank you. Thank you.
1 minute to close.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so
It's perfect, fine. Almost everybody.
is everybody back and present?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So my question to you, what groups did you form? How did you form the groups? You can speak to me. Breakout room 1, for example, how did you create the groups? What did you do? Breakout room 2, what would you like to share with us? How did you do it? Was it a difficult task for you? How did you do it? Okay.
Tech issues.
You had technical issues. Okay. Okay. Technical, it is arranged by the other university. So this is how it works. So there might be some, I don't know, additional technical issues. Well, I can tell you what typically people do. When people are asked to form such groups, they usually form groups that are based on similar shapes or sizes or colors. And only from time to time, people decide to form groups in which everybody is different. And this type of activity simply shows that most of us have a natural preference for what we already know, so that we try to do something that is similar to us. So let me show you another activity, which is called the Circle of Trust. We'll do it together, and you may keep the information private. So, but I would like you to draw it, or you can, if you want to, you may also do it on the computer, or you can imagine, so you can do this in your head. But this is how it goes. Think about your closest friends, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 people. There's only one rule: they cannot be your family members. So you may, if you write a table, if you draw a table, you may put the names of the initials of the people on the left in a column. Your closest friends. Okay, think about your closest friends. People that you really trust, but not your family members. Okay. I don't think this is very difficult. I know that sometimes people say, I have only 3 close friends, but if possible, think about even more. And then on top of this table, please add these dimensions: gender, age, ethnicity, things like whether they are American or Indian or Latino or African American, education, sexual orientation, and disability. And I think that if you now look at the table and if you look at your friends' names and these different diversity dimensions, probably you will see that the inner circle of the people that you trust the most doesn't have much diversity. In other words, usually what people notice is this, that their closest friends are very similar to them. And these two first activities, the circle of trust, and the first one, the tag game, shows us one type of bias. This is the type of bias that is called affinity bias. And now I would like you, this is the last activity before I begin talking about implicit bias, is this riddle. If you know the answer to this riddle, please don't say it. But first, please read this story and try to answer the question that you have on top. Can you explain this? You may write your answers to this riddle in the chat, okay? Or you may also speak up, so it's up to you. Please write your answers in the chat.
He was adopted.
Okay.
So Sophia says maybe he was
adopted, yes. Okay. Maybe he was adopted. He has two fathers, and one of them is biological. Yes, you are like most people, or at least a lot of people. So,
anybody else?
Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, I can tell you that you are like 40%. 40%. Grandfather and grandson. Okay, were involved in a cancer. Yes.
Yes.
One person gave a very good answer that the boy's mother was a surgeon. But it shouldn't be surprising to you that 40% of people say what you have also said, that this boy had two fathers, that he was adopted. So this riddle shows gender bias, this natural preference for us to simply think that a man should be a surgeon and not a woman. So this leads us to the theme of this presentation. What is bias? And very often when we talk about bias, we talk about implicit bias, because basically it is a set of beliefs, opinions that we have, and that we simply activate in a very automatic way on a daily basis. And this happens because also, as my colleague has observed, today we are a product of the upbringing in a certain culture, society, and also we are also influenced by anything that shapes our life. So all our experiences also influence how we perceive the world. So the question is, why does it matter? Well, it matters a lot because the set of different opinions that we very often are not aware of, this set of opinions simply influences the way we perceive the world, what attitude we show toward different people coming also from various cultures, how we behave towards different people. Maybe we are friendlier and nice to certain groups of people, and we are more reserved and distant to others. It also shapes how we put our attention. So, for example, imagine that you meet somebody from a different culture. The question is, where do you put your attention? What things about the person are you interested in? Is it behavior? Is it the posture? Is it what the person is saying? And also implicit bias shapes our listening skills. As we all know, people prefer to speak, and listening is considered to be one of the most difficult skills. So the question is, maybe there are some people that we really want to listen to, which means that we don't multitask, that we put our mobile phones away, that we really listen and try to understand what the other person is saying. Maybe we ask questions if we don't understand something. So as you can see, the different types of implicit bias really play a very important role in our lives. But today I will focus mainly on different types of bias in the assessment process and also bias in written communication. So if you look at the assessment process, you can notice that there are many types of bias. And I think that maybe if your first impression is that you don't know what these expressions mean, I think that if I explain them to you, you will recognize them. Because I think that this is something that many of us use when interacting with other people. Conformity bias is, for example, very often related to what we know as peer pressure. So very often we want to conform to what most people in a group say, we conform to how they behave. So even though our attitudes may differ from the attitudes of the whole group, we try to agree with them because we want to be like them, okay? The beauty bias simply this is a kind of bias that we activate when, for example, we have a certain standard of beauty in our minds. And you can imagine that it may differ from one culture to another. So when we take a look at someone, when we try to assess this person, sometimes the standard that we hold in our minds may simply influence this assessment. So, for example, if we usually associate beauty with tall, slim people, somebody who is a little bit shorter and somebody who is not very thin, not very slim, may appear not to be as attractive to us. And we simply may favor people who are just like the first type. Affinity bias is what I have described before. So when we assess people, imagine that you may assess your friend, you may assess your coworker. Usually people have this natural preference for people who are just like them. Maybe people who come from the same country, or maybe from the same region, or people who speak a similar accent, people who have attended the same schools. And then we have this confirmation bias, which many people think is really very important because it may have very serious consequences. And for example, let's imagine that you meet people for the first time. And very often we create our first impressions. And then we try to simply confirm our first impression by selecting the information that will only support the first impression. So let's say we meet someone and we may think, okay, this person is really, really very, very, very boring. Okay, so we take a look at this person and we look only for this information that will support our first impression. And as we know perfectly well, the first impression may be really misleading. So it may have very serious and negative consequences. Halo effect and horns effect are called, I think we might call them two sides of the same coin, because they are also activated, or we can see their power also, especially when we meet somebody for the first time. And the halo effect means that we like a certain feature, by a certain characteristic that the person displays. And this one attribute simply influences our overall opinion about this person in a positive way. So for example, and we disregard other signals. So let's imagine that you meet somebody who is tall, handsome, wears glasses, and most people think, okay, this person is very intelligent, okay? And the Horn's effect works in the different direction. So imagine you meet somebody who is fat or even obese. So the person may be very intelligent and maybe knowledgeable, but this one characteristic may simply influence your whole opinion about this person, and you may simply think, okay, he or she must be lazy, okay? Contrast effect, as the name suggests, can be observed when we simply compare people. Okay, and you can imagine that if you compare somebody who is really outstanding with an average person, the average person simply seems to be even weaker. And microaggression, I think that this is something you may observe in many multicultural environments. In a multicultural society, multicultural companies. And microaggression very often takes form of hidden insults, very unpleasant remarks that people say and address usually at others who come from marginalized groups. So you may, for example, be very impolite to people who are homosexual, or people who are immigrants, or who come from a country you don't like. So you may treat them, you may say in a very unpleasant way, you may say, you people. When they say something, you may roll your eyes. So you may also display your microaggression by your body language. So what happens very often that if you are a person who is the victim, we might say, of this, of such messages, such people are on alert. So they are very careful. They are always on alert. They try to protect themselves. So you can imagine that this somehow also shapes the way they interact with people. So the question is, what can we do about it? Okay. So as you can imagine, because implicit bias is something that we are not aware of, the first step, okay, is to be aware of it. So we have to learn about it. And we always have to simply understand the potential for bias. How to do it, I will explain it in a moment. At university, for example, or in a company, I would say that even in our private lives, we should try to look at people as a whole, to take this holistic approach, and not to assess people looking at only one aspect, one thing, one test, one exam, one situation. So we should rather try to take a broader perspective. And very often what universities do, what sometimes companies do, they try to create what we call inclusion and diversity programs. So in other words, they form programs, the aim of which is to let people know that because they are different, because they come from different cultures, they are welcome. And they are welcome, and the universities or the companies are the places where the people want to meet them and work with them. But how can we do it? So what people very often do, what companies do, is this. They encourage their employees, and sometimes this is also what I say to my students, to take what this test that you can see here. This test is called Harvard Implicit Association Test. And you can see that it was what university it was developed by. And I would like to show you what they write on their website. Okay, how they also explain the rationale behind this test. Because on the one hand, that they say that people don't always say what's on their minds because simply they don't want to. And they give this example of a heavy smoker who smokes 2 cigarettes a day, but tells people that he or she smokes only 1 because this person knows that it will be quite embarrassing to admit that he or she smokes 2 packs of cigarettes. But another reason is sometimes that people are unable simply to say what's on their minds. So, for example, you are this heavy smoker, but you don't really want to know how many cigarettes you smoke. So you know that it's a lot, but you don't count it, and you simply you don't try to keep track of it. So this test, the purpose of this test is simply to let people know what they hide from themselves. Okay, and I would like to show you this test. 1 moment. Okay, we're not going to take the test. If you are interested, you may do it in your free time. And on this website, you will also find more information about it. But I simply wanted to show you what different types of bias may be tested, may be checked. So for example, if you have this sexuality test, it checks whether your automatic preference is for straight people rather than gay people, or the gender bias related to career. So like this is what we, for example, talked about when we talked about a woman who was also a surgeon. So weapons, transgender, whether you have natural preference for people who are cisgender, which simply means for people who identify with the sex that was assigned at their birth or age, whether you have natural preference for old people or what we can observe in our society today, rather for young people. So we call this bias ageism, or race, as you can see, weight. You can also have some political tests, preference for certain presidents, disability, and so forth. So I just wanted to say that the tests, as you can see, are changed. So we have John Biden here also. But if you really want to understand what your different types of implicit bias are, I would really recommend taking this test. Okay. And we talked about also, if you remember, about creating inclusion and diversity programs. And I would like to show you a certain study that was conducted a few years ago. The question is, are Family and Brandon more employable than Laisha and Jamal? So this is what Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the University of Chicago wanted to find out. So what they did in 2003 is this. They sent 5,000 resumes to 1,250 employers. But before they did this, they had interviewed those employers. And all of them said that they were really aggressively seeking diversity in their companies. Okay? But the results of this study were shocking for all people, because the resumes were different in one aspect. Half of them contained white-sounding names, Emily and Brendan, and half of them had Elisha and Jamal, we might say typically African-American names. So as a result, those applicants whose names sounded more white received 50% more invitations to job interviews. Okay, so this shows that even though we may try to mitigate bias, to make it less severe, it is still very difficult. But it also, the study also shows that we may also talk about bias in written communication, because this is what appeared in the resumes. So let's move on to the second type of bias that I wanted to discuss today, namely bias in job descriptions. And first, I would like you to take a look at this table, and you can see that on the left, there are some adjectives that appear in job descriptions that are considered to be feminine. If you take a look at them, you will see that they are about things like commitment, cooperation, being supportive. So basically, what is here simply emphasized is developing good working relationships, whereas the masculine adjectives are more about leadership, competition, and being independent. So what does it mean for written communication? It simply means that in order to attract both men and women to apply for a certain position, we may use obviously feminine and masculine adjectives, but we should try to use an adequate mix of words, because what happens is this: if you use mainly masculine words, most women decide not to apply for this position. And but if you use both feminine and masculine adjectives, then it is fine also with women. And if we also want to omit this kind of gender bias in job descriptions, we should try to use neutral titles when we describe the job position. So we can talk about engineer, developer, not guru. We use pronouns he, him, she, her interchangeably, or we may also decide to describe our ideal candidate simply by describing him using pronoun you. When we think about requirements, this is a very interesting aspect of writing job descriptions, because if you have a very long list of job requirements, it discourages women. There's one famous study, this was Hewlett-Packard internal report, that simply stated that women apply for position when they know that they fulfill 100% of all the job requirements. The case is different with men. They apply for a position when they fulfill 60% of the job requirements. And it doesn't mean that women lack confidence, because this was also studied later on, but it simply shows that men and women understand the recruitment process in a different way. So for women, the requirements are real. So women really feel that they have to meet them. Whereas for men, the situation is completely different. They don't think that these requirements are real, they are just a suggestion. Okay? So what is generally recommended is this: if you want to attract both men and women, then think about the must-have requirements, the most essential job requirements that should be placed in a job description. So this is, and then you will encourage more more diversity, meaning both men and women. Okay, and obviously when we want to eliminate or mitigate gender bias in written communication, we also try also to address what we write at people who come from different backgrounds. But we can also use these recommendations not only in the recruitment process, but we can also use them as the general recommendations to use non-discriminatory language in written communication. Unless it is necessary, we use masculine or feminine genders or pronouns interchangeably to talk about gender. And when we describe people, we don't make any unnecessary references to their physical or intellectual abilities. So, for example, we don't talk about, I don't know, a blind musician. We don't make unnecessary references to people, to people's race or ethnicity. So we don't talk about a black doctor or their religion, I don't know, a Jewish singer, or we don't mention their age or sexual orientation. But as I have already stated, it is not all very easy to do. And I would like to show why it matters to mitigate implicit bias, to make it less severe. Because even if we do it all, I would say it is still, for many people, it is still very difficult not to use different types of bias in their reasoning. So, for example, in Great Britain, 80% of employers say that when they take decisions, they take into consideration the regional accents that people display in their conversation. So for 67% of the British people, talking to a disabled person is a little bit embarrassing. They feel uncomfortable. For 15% of workers, it is unthinkable even to report to a 70-year-old boss, or imagine that they might have a 70-year-old boss. If we take a look at the US men, 14.5% of the American men are taller than 6 feet, but if you look at the Fortune 500 CEOs, 58% of them are very tall. Ethnic minorities in the American society occupy 36.3% of the whole population. Yet, if you look at the board seats, only 7% of the seats are taken by them. And American overweight women complain that they earn less, 6.2% less than their colleagues. So what should we take away, knowing that this is not so easy for us to mitigate this implicit bias? I think that it might be comforting for us to know that we are all susceptible to bias. And why? Well, first of all, it is something completely natural for our brain to look for patterns, to create associations, to create shortcuts, simply to understand the world, to deal with this overload of information. So this is something natural. And if you remember, my colleague today talked about culture described as software and us being programmed by our culture. And we can also see the result of this social conditioning when we talk about implicit bias. So in other words, we are a product of our culture. So we have certain assumptions about the world. We have certain opinions about the world, about people's roles in the world. We are also shaped by our experiences. So what can we do about it? These are the general rules and the general recommendations to learn more about this implicit bias and show respect to other people, always check for bias in everything we do, and keep an open mind. It may be, probably not, it doesn't sound easy, but it obviously means a lot of work. So how can we do it? What can we do about it? So first of all, if you want to, you may take the implicit bias test to learn more about your own implicit bias and hidden assumptions. But you should also make a commitment to be alert, to develop a certain kind of understanding of potential for bias in many things that we do. And we should try to engage in self-reflection, to think about this potential, to reflect on what we have done, or maybe also look into the future, to think about our decisions, for example, that we will take very soon, and check for bias. But what is quite promising is this, that it is all very flexible. So even though if you take, for example, the implicit bias test, and to your surprise, you may learn that you display a certain kind of racial bias towards other people, it may change with time. And as people say, you may unlearn, you may develop new opinions about the world. To some people, it comes in a very natural way. When they are in a multicultural society, you can imagine at university, for example, when they make friends with people from other cultures, suddenly these encounters may change their thinking. But what is obviously important here is keeping an open mind, because if you don't do it, if you don't have an open mind, then as you can imagine, you will use confirmation bias. So you will stick to your beliefs and your old attitudes, and you will look only for evidence to support what you already believe in. And then you will learn nothing. And we can imagine, obviously, that we can also respect other people. We should try to be inclusive, which simply means that we not only tolerate, but we also value different working styles, different ways of taking decisions. We treat people as our partners. And what is very important, we try to understand their situation, how they feel. So we also practice empathy. We try to understand their perspective. And if you remember, one of the recommendations was also checking for bias. So we can devise certain techniques or procedures. We can develop certain procedures to help us. So for example, if we want to make difficult decisions, we may decide to work in a group of diverse people, people coming from different backgrounds. This might be helpful in mitigating bias. We may use guidelines or standards or procedures. This is what also, for example, many companies do when they assess job applicants. In some companies also, to mitigate bias, people are invited to attend 5 job interviews in succession. And then the people who interviewed them gather and they exchange their opinions. We can also try to minimize stressful situations, because basically when you are stressed, you try to rely more on automatic thinking, and this very often leads to biased decisions. So if you know that, for example, the chances are that a certain situation will be very stressful, take a break, refocus on what you are going to do. I think that it is also obvious for anyone that we should try to separate feelings from facts, because our feelings, both positive and negative, may influence our opinions. And always we try to avoid simply stereotypes, to treat people as individuals, not as part of a group. And in the whole process, what is important is to be open, to develop this spirit of curiosity. We should be not only telling our story, so we should not only talk about our own experiences or points of view, but we should be ready to listen to the stories of other people and practice active listening. So really listen, really try to understand. Sometimes people mix this active listening with the obligation to agree with the other person. You may listen actively, you may ask questions, you may ask for clarification, you may take notes, simply to understand the other person, but you don't have to agree with this person. And what is also important is in the whole process, let's try to treat people as individuals. So I would like simply to mention that these are the general rules or recommendations. We will never totally get rid of the different types of implicit bias that shape our thinking and understanding of the world. But I truly believe that if we try, first of all, to be aware of our own different types of bias that we have, and if we try to understand them, if we try to reflect on what we do, check for bias, then I think we will be better equipped to interact and communicate in a multicultural society. I think there is still some time left, so if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. You may write, you may speak up, you may write the questions also on the chat.
Yes. Just a comment.
Just comments, okay. I can see your comments. Okay. Okay. So I think that we now all deserve a break. So I think we resume our meeting at about 11 o'clock. Yes. Probably, I think that the technical support will also exactly state when we begin our workshops, because as I was told, they were trying to coordinate all the different sessions, but according to our plan, we are supposed to begin our workshops. The first workshop will start at 11 o'clock and will be devoted to exploring cultural dimensions. And the one that is devoted to bias in intercultural communication will begin an hour later at 12 o'clock. So thank you for your attention and for your nice comments, and see you later. Goodbye.